Welcome to Loud and Clear, a podcast dedicated to amplifying the voices of women in music. I'm your host, Olivia Adams, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Alexa Haynes-Pilon. Canadian-born Alexa Haynes-Pilon has been described by Early Music America as a special artist with a brilliant future. Alexa has quickly established herself in the early music scene, performing on Baroque Cello, Viola da Gamba, Baroque Bassoon, and Dulcian. She is the principal cellist of both Musica Angelica Baroque Orchestra and Opera Neo, and co-director and cellist or gambist of Musica Pacifica. She has performed with numerous American ensembles in Toronto. She was founding member of the early music ensemble Resonance and performed with Accenti Vocali and Tafel Music Baroque Orchestra. She has concertized throughout the United States and Canada, as well as in Bogota, Mexico City, and most recently Budapest, where she collaborated with the Hungarian State Opera. She has recorded for the TV show Hannibal and was featured as the solo cellist on the soundtrack to the highly acclaimed 2017 documentary That Never Happened, Canada's first national internment operations. Her recent album recordings include with the American Bach Soloists and Musica Omnia label and Music and Arts label. Alexa has co-founded Los Angeles Baroque and Amateur Baroque Orchestra in Pasadena, California. She has been the guest conductor for many recorder and viola da gamba societies. She also has taught at the Claremont Graduate University and has given master classes at Michigan State University, and she recently directed a program for Musica Angelica Baroque Orchestra in Los Angeles. She will be going home to conduct the Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra in May 2023, and this summer she will join the Orchestra Wiener Academy for European tour. Now, just a heads up, in this episode, Alexa does a deep dive into Baroque cello playing, and there are a lot of descriptors and some jargon, so I'm going to do my best to have pictures and videos linked so that you can have a visual for some of what we're talking about, but I really encourage you to catch the live stream of her performance with the SSO to really understand what she's talking about. It's so interesting. I learned so much in this episode, and I hope you do too. Welcome, Alexa. I'm so excited to chat with you today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. This is very exciting.
Oh, my pleasure. Well, I like to start all of my interviews with the same question, and that is, what led you down the path of becoming a musician?
That's a great question, but are you wanting to know like how I kind of got started in music, or what kind of led me to like the professional path?
Yeah, just what's your origin story there?
Okay, well, when I was like 2.5, I never know who was on which show, but I being two, you watch like Mr. Dress Up, which is the Canadian show, and also Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And one of them had Yo-Yo Ma and the other one had Ulfra Hornoy. And they were like about a month apart, or maybe 2 months apart. And when I saw the first one, I was like, Mom, I want to play this, because they were playing obviously cello. And I was like, Mom, I want to play this. And my mom's like, yeah, okay, you're 2.5, you're fine. And then the next, like whenever the next person came on to the other show, I was like, Mom, I still want to play this. And then she's like, okay, fine. So she's like, clearly you remember this, and this, you want to look into this. So we found John Payson, who actually is one of the cellists in SSO, and he took on little 3-year-old Alexa.
Oh my goodness.
And that was just kind of, just the beginning of it all. But what I am forgetting to tell you is that when I was a wee little thing, my mom actually used to play Dvorak cello concerto. She would have a record, like a boombox, whatever, under my crib, and she would play Dvorak cello concerto for me every night, and that's how I went to sleep in my crib.
Oh my goodness.
So it's like destiny that, I kind of ended up being a cellist. So ever since, my first days on this planet.
I love that story. I love that.
Yeah, so there's kind of two things,
Yes.
two childhood stories. But, my mom was a piano player. My dad does a lot of like singing, and my grandpa was a violinist. And so, it kind of just was part of, the family package. My mom taught me piano. And then when I was in grade 6, I took flute for a year, which that instrument did not connect with me as like a performing. Like I love the flute, don't get me wrong,
yes,
but but it just didn't, like when I was playing it, it just didn't connect. So, and then the following year I actually started playing bassoon in band, and I'm still doing it all. So
still doing it all. I love it. So what was it that drew you to like specifically studying and specializing in Baroque music, and that inspires your path down all the amazing initiatives that you do in early music?
So it was, a typical story of I was studying at Brandon University, and I was studying with Leanne Zacharias, and I was complaining about, the Bach suites. It's just one of those things, I was like, I just don't understand how I'm supposed to like make this connect, how I'm supposed to make this work. I wasn't getting it. So she was like, oh, well, actually, there's a workshop that my sister, Christina Zacharias, because Christina is a member of Telfa Music. So there was the Summer Institute in Toronto. So, Leanne just kind of like shipped me off. And the first year went well. I went back the second year, and then it really like kind of clicked in my brain, and it just made a lot of sense. So then Christina Mahler, she's now retired, but she was the principal cellist of Telfa Music. She pretty much just said, move to Toronto and you can study with me. So I finished my degree quickly, and then I just like packed my bags and I moved to Toronto, and I had, many lessons and years of study with her, and, other members of Telfa Music as well, including Christina Zacharias and, Jean Lamont, like Charlotte Nediger, I had this whole round experience of like every instrumentalist and just kind of learning from everybody. And that kind of was the deep dive into the dark side of Baroque music.
I had the dark side of Baroque music. So is it fair to say that it was like those mentorship opportunities that really opened up your world into the Baroque?
Yeah, no, and it's very interesting because up until that point, just playing like a general bass line of Vivaldi violin sonata or whatever,
right. Yeah,
whatever you want to, whatever sonata you want to say it like, and then you play the bass line. It just felt so boring and like, is this literally all I'm supposed to do? But then when I was studying with these people, then like it opened my eyes to all these like gestures and different ways of shaping things and how to really like support generally a treble melodic instrument. But also, you play with other cellists, and it was just kind of a different way of looking at shapes. And that was the cool part that really drew me into.
It's funny that you say like you felt you weren't connecting to the music of Bach. I had similar sentiments in my teenage years. I mean, like I've played enough prelude and fugues in my life. So someone says at age 18, and I was like, I don't need to do anymore. I don't like Baroque music. I don't think I'm going to do this anymore. And then what is it that I reach for, when I need to sit down and have a couple of minutes to read through some music? It's Bach. It's
right. Totally. And another thing that I found really was very eye-opening, because with the Institute, the Telfa Music Institute, they actually have bows that you can borrow, and just having like the right equipment for the right era. I think that was really what drew me to it, because you create these completely different shapes with your equipment than if you have a modern setup.
Absolutely. I felt the same way when I started to translate my music. When I was in my master's, my instructor was a professional harpsichord player, and she made me play all my Baroque music at least try it on the harpsichord so I could understand how the ornamentation works. And it just blew my mind how much more sense the Baroque music made when you're exactly right. When you have the right equipment, it was like, oh, well, this makes way more sense now.
Well, because we've all been to those recitals, and where like, they have a program of like Bach, and then maybe like some sort of classical sonata, and then maybe a modern thing, like maybe like, or whatever. And like the Bach and like the 21st century piece kind of sounds the same. And it's just kind of adding more tools to your toolbox. Like the eras were different, people thought differently. People, they didn't have televisions, they had other things that were important to them. And just kind of reading all these books about how the society was kind of helps you understand like some of the gestures, some of the rhetorical devices that they would have used.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the context behind the piece. Well, I think that leads perfectly into my next question. And that's for people who don't know, can you sort of explain what's the difference between performing on a Baroque cello and like the viola da gamba among the other Baroque instruments that you play versus the modern instruments? Could you describe some of those differences?
Sure. Well, I can start with Baroque cello because that's what people will see in May. So with a Baroque cello, generally I'm tuned down to 415, which is if you hear an oboe playing the pitch at the beginning of a concert, I'm half a step below that. But also depending on what repertoire and what country I'm in, like it can be, 430, which is just slightly below that, or I could be at 392 or 465, depending on, if I'm playing Renaissance or whatever. So pitch is a little less standard in many ways. And depending on even like which court we're talking about, the reason why people know what pitches to use for certain things is pipe organs. And they measure the pipes, and also wind instruments, measuring the finger hole distances and things like that. that. So with Baroque cello, I generally play at 415, but like I said, that kind of opens this whole other realm of discussion about pitch. But I also play with gut strings. I think my strings are maybe sheep gut, maybe lamb. I can't remember. So we have this, it's a bit of a softer texture, but that also leads then, like if it's like really humid outside, your hands get really gross. And the texture of your fingers change. It's the same with gut strings. So if there's a major difference, that's why you hear Baroque musicians tuning all the time, because if there's I always make the joke, if anybody breathes, their strings will go out of tune. So it's that same kind of thing. So it's a little bit more of a sensitive instrument. So we have to do a lot more tuning, but the fingerboard, where you put your fingers to play, that's generally closer to the body, and the tension of the instrument is much less. Also, I don't have little fine tuners down below, where you always see cellists reaching around to tune. I tune with the big tuners, generally by the head. Also, I obviously have a different bow, different shape. It's a little bit more curved, which allows for different shapes. But yeah, so going into the viola da gamba. Oh, so obviously cello is still tuned in fifths, like in a regular thing. I don't have an end pin, so I hold the instrument with my legs, as I do with the viola da gamba, which the instrument that I generally use is a 7-string instrument, tuned in fourths with a third in the middle. So it's kind of related to guitar or lute, and frets. And the frets are actually also gut, as well as the strings of the viola da gamba. So cellos generally have a rounded back. Viola da gambas have a very flat back. What else can I say? We have F holes for cello, C holes, which are those things in the front. F holes for cello, C holes for gamba. Oh, obviously the bow hold is a little different. So on a cello, this is where it's hard to do it just verbally and not for people to see.
Yeah, of course. I'll link to pictures and things like that.
Baroque cello, we have our hand above the stick, just kind of like what you would normally see in cello playing in an orchestra. But for viola da gamba, I actually hold the bow on the other side. So my hand is close to the hair. And that also allows for, it's kind of confusing because where the hand is on a cello, you pull away from your body, that's a down bow, and up bow is the tip where you come back to your body. But with a viola da gamba, the heavy stroke, it's away from your body. So you're at the tip and you're coming towards your body. That is your strong.
It's a bit of a reverse.
Yeah. So it's a little bit reverse. Plus also then we have fourths with a third in the middle. So I often get asked to play the same repertoire on both instruments. And it's a bit of a mind twist because it's completely different fingerings, but same range, things like that. Yeah. But the two instruments are not related at all. We have the violin family and then we have the viol family. So the viol family started 15th century, and then that was mainly used in consort type pieces. And by consort, I mean there's a variety of sizes of viola da gambas and they all play together. And then 1520s, that's kind of when the violin family started to emerge. And the violin family was kind of known as this outrageous, harsh thing, as opposed to these beautiful, la la la, viols. So it's but then obviously as time changes, they were kind of cello, the violin family, cello and bass gamba were kind of used interchangeably for a long time. And then gamba kind of fell out of practice. It was not favored as much because it wasn't as loud. So then cello kind of took over, but people still use it for certain things, especially Bach.
Well, of course. And I mean, I imagine that also the size of concert venues and the fact that people wanted to go to concert venues rather than doing these very intimate concerts in homes and in smaller spaces, that sort of affected the volume of the instrument. It started to have an effect, right?
Totally. Yeah. And then, with the gamba, it became used more for kind of a meaning, or if you wanted a different kind of texture or whatever. For example, I just finished St. Matthew Passion, where I played, continuo cello, and then I have 2 gamba solos, and one of them is Cum Sus Kreutze, is when, Jesus has the cross and he's trying to carry it, and then if you're thinking about St. John Passion, that's the gamba solo, Es ist vollbracht. It is finished, it is done, kind of symbolizes, a certain aspect of the story of Jesus dying. So instruments can be used for a specific effect.
Yeah.
To kind of really connect with an audience.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. It's interesting that you say you played with gut strings. I didn't realize that. I am not a string player. I'm a pianist. I did not realize that string players still played with gut strings, and are they hard to get, or are they fairly common still?
I wouldn't say they're common, but you have to know where to get them.
Right.
And that's kind of the tricky spot. Once you have a person, you're totally fine. But up until World War II, people were generally using guts. So this isn't that far away of a concept.
No, it's not.
it's still within, living history for many folks. So it's, it's just kind of bringing it back. And, steel is useful for many things, and gut is useful for also many things, depending on what you're doing.
You have an upcoming concert with the Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra, which we've referenced here already, which is why I asked you to come on the podcast. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about the program that you're performing and what our audience can look forward to. Did you have a say in the repertoire that was picked?
Yeah, actually, when Mark talked to me, he said pretty much, he was just like, I just want it to be very cello heavy. And I was like, okay, here we go. So, which then leads to, like, obviously I don't have as many like wind players. Like I have 2 flutes, 2 oboes soon that are going to be playing, but it's not going to be like a full, that's much later repertoire than what we're presenting. And, this is like my first time working with SSO. So I was like, I kind of want to bring a little bit of like everything. So I have some Telemann, I have Vivaldi, got Handel, I have a little French, I have a little Lully. French is like notorious for being the scariest kind of Baroque music to play.
Why is that?
Stylistically, it's very complex. So I chose 2 semi-familiar movements from Bourgeois Gentilhomme. So we're doing March of the Turks and also the Chaconne at the end. So these will be really great. And these are kind of March of the Turks. You can just do so much with it. Like with texture, I'm going to like play with a little bit like basses only, and then kind of adding to that. And so it's one of those really cool. Maybe I'll get somebody to like have some sort of staff and. I haven't gotten that far down my craziness, but it's just, I wanted to touch very briefly on French Baroque, but it is one of those things that most orchestras actually won't play because it is just stylistically, it's a lot more complex, kind of just getting the motions of it. The word is inégal, meaning like,
yes,
unequal. So it's that plus then creating these other gestures that just kind of become a lot more. So I just thought it'd be kind of fun to do a little dive into French Baroque music, but like we're also going to be doing Vivaldi and the usual Germans like Telemann and
the classics, quote unquote. Yeah.
And then so I decided I'm doing 2 cello concertos. So I'm doing 1 Vivaldi. This is actually like the quirkiest concerto, I think. It's like super weird, and I love this concerto. I got the opportunity to play it actually at the beginning of the pandemic for a recording for Musica Angelica.
Nice.
So, and I was like, I didn't actually ever play it for an audience, so I'm looking forward to breaking that out. And Leonardo Leo, he also is just some crazy stuff. So, I tried to pick 2 cello concertos that probably nobody's ever heard, that are actually like challenging for everyone involved to some degree. Like the Vivaldi, it's very like kind of jazzy in a way, and it's like a lot of syncopated kind of things, and it's really cool. So yeah, and then we're doing some Handel because can't have a Baroque program without Handel and Telemann. Yeah, so then the one Handel, because Mark said he wanted cello heavy, there's one of them has a second movement with 2 solo cello parts. He asked for a big cello program, so I'm just gonna
You gave it to him.
Yes. So, and I decided to go with a lot of repertoire that not only features the cello, gives everybody a shot at having some fun stuff. Like there's the last piece on the program. It's so cool. It's by Telemann, and it just features 2 flutes and then has this like bum, 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 underneath. And it's unbelievable. It is so cool. And, I just wanted to have like really fun rep and, gave everybody, nobody is just playing whole notes really.
Right. Yeah.
But like everybody has a lot of fun stuff. And that was kind of my objective too.
In Baroque music, a lot of times, like the ensemble music, everyone has that opportunity to shine because there's more contrapuntal, obviously, and there's not as much that sort of instrument hierarchy that we get later on in orchestral music.
Yeah. Like in super early stuff, there's definitely more like violinistic, like hierarchy or whatever. But, as a cellist, I kind of like to, spice it up a little. Show people that, the cello wasn't just a ba, 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 ba kind of instrument.
Yes.
There was a lot happening. And so I'm really excited about my program. So
that's awesome. What does it feel like to return to Saskatoon to lead your hometown orchestra?
Oh, this is so exciting because, like this is where I grew up. This is, like I said earlier, I studied with John Faisant for I think 16 years.
Oh, wow.
Almost 16 years. So, like he was there through, all those teen years. being a cello teacher, being a therapist. He knows, he probably knows all my deepest, darkest secrets. No, but and then obviously his wife Lillian, and we have like Bernadette also in the cello section. Yeah. Don McLean was my band teacher at St. Joe's.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So unfortunately, I'm not using any brass, but it's nice to come back. This is where I got my grounding. This is where I started off with all of this. So it's really nice to come back and share kind of what I've done for the last little while. So
sure.
Yeah, no, it's just really very exciting because these are my teachers, and
and
actually some of my friends from the youth orchestra play in Symphony. So it's not only teachers, but also
colleagues.
So it's going to be really very excited. So it's going to be really hard to not be like, chatting the whole time and actually like get to work. Because, unfortunately, like I only generally get home for Christmas and sometimes a little bit over the summer. I'm there seeing family and my grandma who's like 97, so it's, it's all family type thing. So I never
it's a different type of visit. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I don't really get a chance to like catch up with everyone, Oh, and I started my bassoon studies with Peter Gravelin, who's now retired. But then I moved to study with Marie Seller for a long time.
And of course.
So, it's different instruments coming together, So it's cool. So, and actually the night before we start rehearsals, I'm actually doing B minor mass in San Francisco where I get hired a lot to do. I play second cello, but then for quonium, there's two bassoon parts for quonium. So then I switch because there's a solo cello line, two bassoon lines, and a horn line.
Oh my goodness!
So I play cello, but then I switch to bassoon for this.
And what is that like?
You have to practice it. Like I'm not gonna lie.
Yes.
Like I don't get up and like be like I'm just gonna switch. No, it's really fun. And I do quonium at least once a year on bassoon, so it's really fun because usually people want two or three cellos and it works with one bassoon except for this one movement. So
right.
You
gotta hop in.
Yeah. So it's really fun. So I'll be doing that like the night before we start rehearsing. So
oh my goodness. A full range of experiences.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
You're directing the orchestra from your cello. And I wonder if you can tell us more about that process. For those who've never seen this type of setting, why is it that the Baroque orchestra is often led by an instrument and not by a conductor?
So I'm going to lead from the cello. And as I said before, the cello, I don't have an end pin. So I sit with the cello between my legs. However, there is a lot of evidence, like images, pictures, iconography type things of cellists using either a beer barrel or a stool or a chair or books to prop the cello up. So I've done that before. I've also, there's evidence of also people hooking. There's a cello, one of the Amati cellos, I think is the King cello in Vermilion, South Dakota. There's also another Amati cello in Paris, but they actually have holes like drilled into the back where somebody will take a strap and like hook it into the instrument so they can like process,
Okay.
So my husband's a luthier. So if I had holes in my cello, he would send me divorce papers very quickly. However, there's this really cool, so I've used scarves in the past as well to like kind of hold the cello while it's just not really sturdy enough. So there's this guy, I can't remember his name, but it's a cello strap and it's actually made for modern cello with like an end pin. You hook it on the end pin. However, since I don't have an end pin, I have to do a bit of a MacGyver system with Velcro. So it's a strap. So it's strapped to my body and I can just like walk around and it's been great. Yeah. Cause like up until this point, whenever I've done any conducting with the cello, I generally put it on a chair and then I'm kind of mobile, but people can like, because you can see my bow when I'm standing, as opposed to if I'm sitting, it's hard to lead when you're the lowest one in the group. So it's easier to stand and then people can actually follow your bow. Your bow level is similar to where it is on a violin. So it's just like eye level, it works a lot better. Also, I can move around. I can kind of position myself to whoever needs help. But I think just to kind of give people the experience for, having a cello without an end pin, I will do some of that as well, just so people can kind of see what it's really
like. Yeah.
So, but I will be standing for some and I will be probably sitting for some as well. When I was directing recently in January, I actually did a Telemann triple concerto standing up. And like, that was actually really cool. However, I don't know if I can pull like Leo
right off, but it's a big program.
So we'll see. So it's one of those things, like, it's like a marathon, right? Like you can't just like wake up one morning and be like, I'm going to run a 26K or whatever. You have to prepare your body for it. So luckily luckily I am used to kind of playing with it, and it's actually a really fun option. And I was recently playing with a symphony in the DC area, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you have a strap? Can you stand while playing this program?" And I was like, "Yes, I can, and I would love to." So it's just another option. So okay, so then your second part of your question was,
why is it that the Baroque orchestra is many times led with the instrument rather than a conductor?
Right. So historically speaking, there was no, let's just call it a guy, because that's what it would have been in that time, standing on a podium with a baton. That's kind of like more of a 19th century type thing. However, Lully, the whole staff like stabbing himself, he didn't get his foot amputated and he died, obviously, from gangrene.
Okay, I just wanted to pop in here and say a quick note about what Alexa is talking about. So the way that they used to conduct the orchestra is by using a giant wooden staff and sort of beating it on the ground to keep the pulse. Jean-Baptiste Lully accidentally hit his foot instead of the floor, and a wound developed and it got infected and he ultimately died. So this is the story that Alexa was referring to. I just wanted to clarify that for anyone who might not know the story. Okay. Back to the interview.
So that's the kind of thing that would happen. But there was often a leader, like usually a violinist or a harpsichordist. There's evidence that Abel, who was a cello gamba player, did some leading as well. So it's one of those things that it was more of a smaller chamber style. It's kind of like a big quartet. You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
But then as we get farther down the line, Mendelssohn kind of was thought of to be like the first baton guy, like with a wooden baton. You know what I mean? But but Spohr also, thought that he was, there's just like a lot of like ambiguous, whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
But then we get to like the 19th century with like Berlioz and Wagner, and they wrote on conducting, and they were both like some of the best conductors ever, or that's what has been said. And then we get into start thinking like, oh well, what changed? And it's like, okay, well, the orchestras got bigger. If everybody has an opinion, we're not going to get anything done.
Yeah.
So up to this point, kind of everybody, there was a leader, but there was a lot more, oh well, I'm playing this line, so this is what I think we should do, and there's a little bit more chamber oriented in that way. But yeah, so then I started thinking, okay, well, Wagner, huge repertoire. We no longer can just have somebody like giving our beats or whatever. So he's the first guy that kind of was like, okay, so it's kind of my way or the highway. I'm going to interpret the music. I'm going to tell you how to play it. And that's kind of when this whole idea of like the conductor being
the orchestral hierarchy.
Yeah. And they're the ones who kind of interpret the score. They bring out the gestures. They talk about nuances. They run the show in many ways, as opposed to up to that point, it's kind of, if I told a conductor today that their job was just to keep a beat and to occasionally bring somebody in, can you imagine? Like that would not go well.
Would not go over well.
But that's what it started.
Yeah.
If you think, obviously Bach is very complex, but if you think like Vivaldi or Corelli, that kind of thing, compared to like Wagner, that's very different repertoire. And you really need someone who can help steer the boat, kind of guide you through. Obviously, throughout time, I think the first evidence of some sort of conductor was 1,000 years ago or something, right? So like there's always been like some sort of leader. And like in vocals, we have someone who's always keeping like the taktus. So there's always been some sort of leader, but the idea of somebody like standing there with a baton, do this, that's much more of a 19th century thing. So I'm just kind of bringing it back to basics, and just, I'm thinking of it as like a big chamber experience. I want people to feel like they can ask questions. They can, we can discuss how to shape something. Yeah, but it's going to be really nice to have this kind of new experience with them. So.
Yeah, I love that even in this concert, they're doing it in the smaller venue so that it can be that more intimate experience. And you're doing it with the traditional instrument, with the strap, and leading it from the instrument. So rather than a contemporary interpretation of Baroque music, it's sort of bringing it back to what that original experience might have felt like when we heard those pieces the first time.
I'll be using an iPad. So that's super. I got the iPad and the cello strap. So, like that's my like connection to the modern world.
I love that. What are you enjoying in your musical life right now?
Oh, what am I enjoying in my musical life right now? Quite a bit of travel, which is really nice. I really like experiencing new areas and, meeting new people, getting to collaborate. It's been really, since the pandemic, there's been a lot of travel. So, which I do like. My dad actually came to the last thing, and he actually just left a couple days ago. I was playing in the Bay Area, in San Francisco Bay Area, and then I was in San Diego the week after that. And then I was in LA the week after that, and Dad came down to LA to see St. Matthew. And then we flew back to DC because that's where I spend half my time, which is where I am right now. So yeah, no, he was just kind of with me, and he was just like, I'm so tired. I was like, Dad, like this is like the life of a musician. Like, welcome.
Exactly. It's just traveling from venue to venue with those
like,
eye patches underneath. Yeah.
I can buy these eye bags, like, it's like a lot of time on a plane, and then kind of have to, adapt to, new surroundings, new airlines, depending on where you're going. And, it's just kind of learning to be as flexible as possible and with everything, and, kind of just adapt to what's happening around you. It's really exciting to not always kind of be in like your normal bubble. It's kind of you're in a different bubble every week. And it's really nice. Meet new people, play with new people, kind of merge your musical abilities and whatever to make a program really great. That's the fun part, I think.
I love
that's
that.
why we do this, right? We do this.
Oh, certainly. We do it like the connection through the music is the thing that matters. I tell my students that all the time. We're in festival season here, and I was like, the one performance is not the pedestal moment. It's the making of community. It's the building of community through music as that vehicle. That's the important thing,
Exactly.
And everything else is it's the icing on the cake.
Right.
Well, it's been a real pleasure getting to chat with you. We're going to wrap up our chat with a few rapid fire questions. I've been asking everybody the same 5 questions to end our episodes. No wrong answers, just go with your gut. Can you point to a moment when you knew you wanted to be a musician?
Probably high school, trying to figure out what to do with the rest of whatever I'm going to do. So music just made sense to me. I just kind of always thought it. I always joke that I would have loved to be a doctor, but
you play with guts in a different way.
So
do you have a favorite piece of music to perform currently?
Oh, there's just a lot. Honestly, the one that I kind of get the most rewarding feeling from is like a St. Matthew, actually. And that's just because I came out of St. Matthew, and like every time you finish it, you're just like, wow.
Yeah.
It's like 2.5-hour masterpiece, and every time you play it, it's totally different.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those pieces that you keep coming back. You're like, oh God, I have to prepare for this. And then it like happens and you're like, wow. It's just like being on like the coolest trip.
I love it. Have you ever been given bad career advice, and what was it?
I really can't think of any bad career advice that I've been given. The one thing that I wish for future people is, okay, so yes, I have not gotten bad advice, but there's been a lot of details left out. So, and I think it's just kind of knowing like the business aspect of being a musician, like by the government saying you are your own business.
Right. So of course.
Having to figure out your taxes. Mm-hmm. What do you do about a retirement plan? These kind of things. This is, musicians and mentors, they don't talk about money. Like, how do you make money as a musician? If you are Yo-Yo Ma, fine. But like for the rest of us, how do you juggle making a life? How do you juggle like finances? One thing I learned during the pandemic is that I have kind of all my eggs in one basket, for lack of a better term. Like I solely perform. I don't generally do a lot of teaching. So, like when the pandemic hit, like all of my performing was obviously gone. And I taught a tiny bit, but I don't have a general studio because I travel a lot. So it's just kind of like this idea of like, how do you diversify? How do you make sure that you're kind of able to survive as a musician? Mm-hmm. So I kind of switched your question on you.
No, it's good. I like it.
But yeah, it's just that kind of thing that I would like, you don't learn that in school. You don't really, I don't think I've ever talked about finances with another musician.
Yeah. It was interesting because one of the episodes that just aired where we talked with someone from the Association of Canadian Women Composers, and she said that the best advice was to take a business class, because she's like, I had to learn things the hard way. And she's like, I just wish for other musicians to not have to do that. I absolutely agree with you. One of my colleagues is doing research on portfolio careers of musicians and how to set musicians up successfully to run their own business.
Right. I've actually been thinking about taking up business courses. So it is important and it's not talked about. And I think and everybody seems to struggle with the same things. So it's just coming together collectively to figure out what the best thing is. And honestly, a little bit like that's kind of on schools as well. Like there really needs to be like, okay, you're going to do this. This is what you need to do.
It's part of pedagogy. If we're going to teach classes on how to teach or how to be performers, like how do we market ourselves and what does all of that look like? So
because it's great. You have to juggle performing, teaching, usually a lot of admin work because concerts don't put on themselves.
Yes.
And, like things like this. So just
grant writing and.
Oh, totally. Yeah. So it's those kind of important things that I think are often very overlooked. So
yeah, it's great. What music are you listening to right now?
Well, I fly to San Diego, not tomorrow, but the next day to play Rossini Baroque Cello. So that is currently what famous things. Like it's one of those pieces, like I know it. Like everybody kind of, or at least knows a couple of arias or whatever, but it's just kind of getting the pacing between things and kind of what I'm listening for right now. Also, I have B minor mass coming up and a couple other operas that are coming up. So just kind of getting really familiar with certain things. So I can't think of specific things that I'm listening to right now. I'll honestly, like if I'm just hanging out at home or whatever, I'll probably put like 2000s pop or whatever on, but like top 40, whatever is happening. So yeah, I kind of try to listen to things other than classical music because I think it's important to
absolutely
broaden one's horizons of what people are listening to,
of what music is. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I feel like if us as classical musicians going forward, we have to kind of figure out what the mass population connects to and how to kind of connect with that. So
I couldn't agree more. Well, thanks for coming on Loud and Clear. Do you mind letting our audience know where they can find you? And I'll have links to everything we referenced in the show notes.
Sure. My website is alexahaynes-pilon.com. I'm also on Facebook. I have an Instagram, but honestly, I don't know what the handle is. So
we'll find it.
I haven't really done much on Instagram, but I'm very bad at social media. That's actually another class that I need to take because for how old I am, I should be fully fine with social media. However, it's just, it's a dirty slope, you can go down very quickly. So, but my website is kind of the one thing that is fairly updated. So
amazing. Well, thanks again for coming on Loud and Clear. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Well, that is going to do it for our episode this week. Thanks so much to Alexa for coming on the podcast and enthusiastically teaching us all about the Baroque cello and how it works. I learned a lot in talking with her that I just didn't know about Baroque music. My favorite part was when I asked her about gut strings and she said, you have to know someone, and that once you know someone, you're set. I thought that was hilarious. Be sure to catch Alexa and the SSO live next week on concertstream.tv or in person if you're in the Saskatoon area. Thank you to the Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra for sponsoring this podcast. I'm your host, Olivia Adams. This is Loud and Clear, and you can find me at OA Music Studios on socials. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.